So hello, thank you very much for joining this panel. We are very glad to have here three great speakers: Ricardo Gutierrez, Lessig, as well as Anya Schiffrin, for this panel on democratizing the media. I think you have been following this conference for now a couple of days, when we have talked about a different number of interesting aspects of democracy. The conference is about democratizing work. But if you want working democracy, one of the things that you really need is well-working media outlets. And so for us, it was kind of completely key, in fact, to put this idea of democratizing the media, by which I mean having a democratic governance of the media, but also think about new forms of media ownership. Is a key dimension of the debate. So first of all, I am going to introduce our three great speakers who are going to make short introductions, and then we will have a Q&A session with those of you who are online, and I will quickly wrap up at the very end. So our first speaker, we are going to proceed in alphabetical order. It was the simplest way to choose. Our first speaker is Ricardo Gutierrez. So Ricardo Gutierrez is the General Secretary of the European Federation of Journalists. I guess he's going to talk to you about that, but at the European Federation of Journalists, a lot of proposals have been made in order to protect and to defend media independence and journalist independence. He also teaches media at the Université Libre de Bruxelles. Our second speaker is Lessig. So Lessig is an academic and also, if I can say, a political activist in positive sense. He has done a lot of work on the one hand, the net neutrality, and on the other one, campaign finance in the US. He is in particular the author recently of Republic Lost, that was published in 2015, and in 2019 they don't represent us, and I think a lot of issues that are linked to the problem raised by the funding of democracy are the same issues that we see with the funding of the media. And by the way, if you look in the US, you will see that a lot of billionaires, they do fund both political parties, political campaigns, as well as media outlets. And our third speaker, is Anya Schiffrin. So Anya is the director of the Technology, Media and Communication Center at Columbia University's School of International and Public Affairs. She teaches global media, innovation, and human rights. She has a lot of books on media capture, on media independence, on investigative journalism. The most recent one, who is really, according to me, a must read, is Media Capture: How Money, Digital Platforms, and Governments Control the News. I guess the goal of this session will be to try to get a sense of how citizens themselves could try to control the news. So Ricardo, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Julia. Je pense que je peux m'exprimer en français. Je pense qu'il y a de l'interprétation prévue. C'est pas le cas? C'est le cas?
I don't think so.
No. Okay. So
there's no. You will have to do like me, show your strong French accent.
Okay. Some conferences are. Okay, no problem. So as you said, Julia, I'm the representative of the European Federation of Journalists, which is not an organization representing media outlets, but media workers, so mainly journalists. We represent 300,000 journalists in 45 European countries. So we're talking about the European continent, not just the European Union countries. And from my side, I would say that I'm dealing with the federation since now 2013. I'm really shocked, by the way this profession is facing difficulties after difficulties and crisis after crisis. So as you know, we faced first an economic crisis with the increased presence and operation of online networks, online platforms, doing the job instead of traditional media actors and concentrating the main resources from advertisement and so on. So the economic model is at stake. And I should say that it's really, I don't see any global solution. We don't see, we need a change of model, of system, but to be honest, when I look at the experiences in several European countries, but also in the US and other countries, it's really difficult to find a new global funding model for the media. There are some experiences, fruitful experiences and successful experiences, but you cannot, transpose these little models to the global media ecosystem, I would say. So that's the first challenge for journalists, the collapse, I would say, of the traditional economic system for the media. The second one is the trust crisis. Journalists are considered by many people, and I would say that the COVID issue made it worse. Are considered as people not playing their counterpower role anymore. We are not considered anymore as a counterpower, which is our essential, I would say, and main mission in the society. Journalists are those, in charge of asking in the public interest, those in power to be accountable. So that's the main role of a journalist. And today, this role is not fully fulfilled. Why? Because there is a crisis in the sector. Less and less journalists are working as staff journalists. We have a growing proportion, a growing share of freelancers. Most of them are working in very precarious and more precarious conditions. At the European level, you should know that 30% now of the profession is composed by freelancers. It was 20% maybe 10 years ago. So there is a growing share of freelancers with these difficulties, to get their own revenues from this work. So it's really a serious, and it's not well known by citizens. Most of the people opinion is not really aware of these personal, I would say, economic difficulties for journalists to operate, to simply play their role in the society. There is a trend also related to this, which is the intensification of work within the newsroom. So less journalists producing more and more editorial content on several platforms, not only for the printed platforms, but also the online ones. And that intensification of work has an impact, which is the decrease of the quality of the editorial content. So that's also an explanation for the trust crisis. So the people are not anymore satisfied with the quality, the global, the mean quality, I would say, of editorial content. And on this, in addition to this, we have a global situation of hypocrisy from states. Most of them are declaring, yes, we support freedom of the media, we support media pluralism, it's a legal obligation for them to because it's a key point to democracy. But in fact, most of the states, the European states at least, are not really protecting and defending journalism and journalists. They sign global declarations, or there is a clear example in Europe. In 2016, most of the European states, the member states of the Council of Europe, so 47 European states, sign the Council of Europe recommendation on the protection of journalism and the safety of journalists. And a few years ago, the Council of Europe assessed, the implementation of these recommendations. It's a set of very concrete recommendations regarding the safety of journalists. And the outcome of the assessment was that only 2 or 3 states, Netherlands, Sweden, Italy, implemented these recommendations. So it's a clear example, it's a clear demonstration that, okay, on the principles, these states are claiming that they are protecting freedom of expression, media freedom, media pluralism, but in fact, they are doing nothing in a very adverse, I would say, context. So it's high time to protect journalists, to help them to play their democratic duties in the society. And the reality is that nobody is doing anything to help them. We see some efforts from intergovernmental or international organizations like the European Union. The European Union issued a few days ago a global recommendation on safety of journalists, which is very useful. I should say that maybe you don't know, but 33 journalists were killed in the 5 past years in Europe. 33 journalists killed in Europe, and 17, I think, just in the European Union, including in France, in Poland, in Sweden, in Denmark. It's not just about Daphne Caruana Galizia, which is a very well-known case in Malta, or Jan Kuciak in Slovakia. We have many, many cases of journalists killed on duty, I would say. So there is a recommendation now from the European Union. There are some initiatives from the Council of Europe in Strasbourg with a platform to report media freedom violations, which is a way to push states to take action against these violations. Efforts from the OSCE as well in Vienna, with the work from the OSCE representative for the freedom of the media, which is a global watchdog, I would say, on this issue. The UNESCO is providing training sessions for journalists, but also for policemen, for the judiciary, and so on. So there are some efforts from international organizations or intergovernmental bodies. But at the level of states, I should say that there is nothing, or nearly nothing. So that's the situation, and that's a threat to democracy. I would say that, of course, journalists and the media in particular should take action as well to be more transparent, to be more ethical. So we are at the level of the European Federation of Journalists promoting self-regulation in the media. Self-regulation, including civil society. We don't want just self-regulation operated by journalists talking between them about journalism problems. No, we need to include the civil society. So these are important, I would say, actions from the profession, from the media sector. I really think we should do more on transparency to show citizens that we are on their side, and we have clear, excellent examples recently with the global leaks. So efforts to be done by journalists for sure, but I would like to point out the global hypocrisy of governments, of states on this issue.
Okay. So thank you very much, Ricardo. I guess you gave us a lot of things to think about. Larry, I don't know whether you want to have like kind of a global overview of the way you see the media situation in the world or in the US more particularly, and also perhaps try to highlight differences between what could be done in a European context versus what would be needed in a more US-centered context. And your mic is off. Yes.
Is that better? Yeah. So I would agree with Ricardo in one way and disagree in another. I think there is a global funding model for journalism right now. It just happens to fail both in funding the journalists and the supply of journalism, and also in the demand for journalism. And I want to focus my talk on the way in which it's failing, because I think there's a urgency that this debate about democratic media is kind of missing. So here's two stories about from where we are right now. It's almost exactly 4 years ago that ProPublica revealed that Facebook's ad algorithms were offering ads to people who wanted to target, quote, Jew haters. The system had evolved a category, Jew haters, and if you paid the money, you could be speaking to those Jew haters directly. Now, there was no engineer or person in the ad department at Facebook who ever crafted the category Jew haters. Jew haters was produced by AI algorithm that was basically learning what the people on Facebook's platform would be interested in and generating these categories on the basis of that interest. So that's story one. Story two, just last week, the Wall Street Journal told an astonishing story in their series, The Facebook Files, about EU political parties complaining to Facebook that when Facebook's algorithm for spreading content on the newsfeed had changed, they found that the only way that they could get their messages out there and to be picked up was if they shifted the content of their messages from being balanced ways of addressing important policy issues to very hysterical kind of Donald Trump-like emotional attacks. That was the only way they would appear in the news feeds, and that their complaint was the algorithm had forced the politics into a particular form that was obviously not edifying for politics. Now, both of these stories, I think, point to what we should think of as a kind of epistemic crisis that the architecture of media has brought to us. Because, you know, obviously we do democracy within a particular media architecture. But the architecture that we are doing democracy within right now doesn't aim to maximize the public's understanding of any particular political issue. It aims to maximize the user's engagement. It manipulates the user to maximize engagement. And that manipulation literally kills, take the context of Myanmar, where what was enabled on the Facebook platform is widely understood to have led to many, many deaths in that country. And if you look at the Facebook files more generally, what we can see is that again and again, the company is faced with choices about how to make the platform safer or how to maximize engagement. And again, they choose to maximize engagement, meaning profit, rather than making the platform safer, or from my perspective, a platform that advances understanding more fundamentally. Regardless of the consequences on the audience, their objective is to increase the engagement of the audience with the platform. So for example, the AI technology in Facebook's platform or Instagram's platform will feed body dysphoric young girls images that will increase their body dysphoria. And as their body dysphoria increases, they will consume more of that content. And as they consume more, the AI-driven technology feeds them more. Not because the technology is evil, but because the technology is good at what it is trying to do, which is to maximize engagement, not to maximize or even aim for the health of those who are engaged on that platform. Now, I think that we've seen enough to recognize that we're having a kind of Madame Curie moment. Remember, Madame Curie works with radioactive materials for many, many years before she realizes the harm from those radioactive materials. That's what we should recognize about social media right now. We're standing in the middle of a field that's been strewn with plutonium, and there's a real question about whether we can get across that field safely, or even surviving across that field, because of the negative consequences that these AI technologies of manipulation have spread across the world. Now, I think at this point, we need to consider some radical ideas. And these connects directly with Ricardo's point about exactly how are we funding what we think of as journalism. He was concerned about how do we fund to make sure we get great journalists. I'm concerned about the unintended consequence of the method of funding that we've chosen on how people consume and understand important media. And so here's one radical idea. I think we should be banning all advertising, period, in any content that would have been covered in what we think of as the nightly news, and any content that's a context of import or political or democratic import. The ads should just be banned so that the incentive to engage in a way that's just driving polarized craziness would be removed from the platform. And we would take aim at the economy of stupid engagement, which is what the economy of advertising has produced right now, and end the incentives that these platforms have to drive us to idiocy. Now, in the United States, I think January 6th, the day that there was the insurrection that attempted to overthrow the results of a successful democratic election for president, this is the January 6th lesson. The January 6th lesson is not a lesson about the duplicitous, self-serving politicians who pretended to believe that there was some reason to question the results because they were pandering to their base. I don't think we needed that lesson. Everybody recognized that politicians would be pandering and duplicitous in exactly that way. I think the real lesson to January 6th is the astonishing fact that thousands were led to believe in their heart of hearts a complete lie. And even more astonishing to this day, that 50%, more than 50% of self-identified Republicans say that there is, quote, clear evidence that Joe Biden stole the election from Donald Trump. Now, there's not only no clear evidence, there's no evidence. This is a complete lie, but it has been propagated by this architecture of incentives that drives the media to feed exactly this craziness, because this craziness is what feeds back the attention. This is not, I think, the product of evil geniuses. It's not like anybody set out to destroy American democracy. Not the least, Mark Zuckerberg is not woken up 20 years ago and said, this is my job in life, I'm going to destroy American democracy. Instead, it's the unintended consequence of an architecture of AI-driven media triggered, in the Shoshana Zuboff sense, by this surveillance capitalism. It's trained to maximize on just one thing. And of course, the stories of AI technologies from the very beginning of AI technology has been to hypothesize about all the bad things that happen when the AI maximizes on one dimension. And that's exactly what we're seeing now. And I believe that January 6th is not the worst of that maximization. January 6th is just the beginning, unless we can motivate governments around the world to step up and take responsibility for the poisonous incentives that these tools of manipulation, these technologies of manipulation, have added into our political and cultural life. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anya, I don't know whether you want to focus on
I'm totally happy to come in here. Sure, I have lots to say. I thought the last points were super interesting. Do you want me to come in here right now? Great. Well, first of all, I'm honored to be in such an illustrious group of panelists, people whose work I've read for years, and Lawrence Lessig, everyone knows, but I've never had the pleasure of meeting before, and Ricardo Gutierrez. I wrote a report last year called Saving the Media, where we looked at solutions from around the world, and we drew very heavily on your work and that of your colleagues. So thank you for all of that. Yeah, obviously everything that you're saying is true. And since I teach, I've been trying to look for solutions and focus on what we're going to do about the problem. Because when you have classrooms of young people every week, you have to do that. So I did a report. One of my pandemic projects was a report called Saving Journalism, where I looked around the world to see how were people trying to address the problems that you're talking about. And I used a taxonomy from Nishant Lalwani from Lunate. And I think there's a few things I can say to just cheer everybody up. Number one, Julia referred to my work on global muckraking. And two of the books I edited, maybe like 2015, 2017, were collections of investigative reporting from the Global South. So I spent a lot of time looking at archives. This is work Julia's done also, and reading newspapers from the 1800s and 1900s. And if you do that, you actually feel quite cheered up about the quality of information available today. There's someone in the chat who was asking about the Pandora Papers. I think there's no question that there is more good reporting now than there was 100 years ago, 150 years ago. It took 10 years for people to find out about exploitation on cocoa plantations in Sao Tome and Principe, or what was going on in the Congo under King Leopold. Now, all kinds of terrible problems can be unearthed quickly. There are hundreds of journalists. Pandora Papers had 600 journalists from around the world working together. 20 years ago, when I was starting to do my sort of journalism training on economics reporting, we could only dream of what we're seeing now, where groups like the International Consortium for Investigative Journalists are matching, journalists in Sweden with journalists in Namibia. So it's incredible. I think the problem, as you say, is the funding model has not sorted out, and people like me never believed that there would be a new business model once the internet came. That was clear from the beginning that the new business model was Facebook taking all our money, right? So that's obvious. I never bought the new business model thing, and I'm sort of impatient now with people who are. And then but the quality is better. And then the problem is the audience, right? There's so much fragmentation. There's so much polarization. That the old days, everyone just sitting down, it took forever for people to find out what Nike was doing through its subcontractors in Indonesia. But once it was on the nightly news, it was a big deal and everybody understood. So we've learned the limits to information, exactly what Lawrence Lessig is pointing out, that, we all know campaign finance reform has to happen. We all know that, the banks robbed everybody blind, predatory pricing, financial crises, and we know all these problems. And then even though we have information, nothing actually happens. So those are my sort of my one depressing thing. But is there more great, fantastic supply of important investigative journalism now than before? Yes. Is local news a huge problem? News deserts? Yes. So I began looking around the world to see what are people trying to do about this. And Nishant suggested a taxonomy, which I hope I can remember all of it. But one of it was philanthropic initiatives. The other one was new business models, tax on tech, and public subsidies. And I'm frankly really, really excited. The Local Journalism Sustainability Act has been introduced in the United States. I don't know if it's going to get cut out during the whole reconciliation process, but what I'm seeing is people like me and probably Julia and maybe you, who've been banging the drum for public service media for decades, all of a sudden we're in fashion. So I see this huge interest now in big sweeping solutions, and I find that incredibly encouraging. I mean, things like Julie and I have talked a lot about the, things like the tax credits and tax subsidies that France gives. Well, during the pandemic, France increased them, Canada increased them, but guess what? Indonesia and Tunisia started a whole program of tax credits. It's people in the US started talking about it. Julia's been supportive of the idea of vouchers for a really long time, and you put that into the Stigler report. Well, now here's someone in the Q&A asking about vouchers. So I do think there's this global appetite now. I have to really tip my hat to James Dean and Mark Nelson and Luminate, who's got very interested in this idea of a fund for public interest media. They're looking for an anchor donor. This weekend, Maria Ressa and Mark Thompson said they would come on board. Shitu Bayal has been appointed as the director. And, their argument was a simple argument. What you're all saying, it's underfunded, that we have all this money going into development aid and we just don't have enough money going to public interest media, especially in the global South. So far they haven't gotten that big chunk of change, but they're saying they'd like $1 billion. Everyone's talking in billions now. Bob McChesney, International Fund for Public Interest Media. So I think there's a big appetite for big solutions, and I think that's really exciting. In the report, the piece that got the most attention was the section on Australia and the News Media Bargaining Code, which my student Kylie Tumiati wrote. And she wrote about it last fall, and nobody was paying attention because, obviously the pandemic. And then in February, Australia passed the law. And remember, Google and Facebook threatened to leave Australia, said we're not going to cover any Australian news anymore. And the law was passed, and now they have to pay publishers. So that forced Google, I think, to settle some of the copyright stuff in France. So I'm not keen on a future where journalism is supported by Google and Facebook at all. I think that's very worrisome, and obviously the potential for a capture is tremendous. But I am keen on a future where we tax the hell out of those evil companies, make them pay their fair share, and then redistribute it through a public interest fund for journalism. So I'm pleased to see there's lots of big ideas right now. Philanthropy obviously has got a role to play in many countries. I mean, we have so many small outlets all over the world that are doing really interesting reporting. And, we know they're never going to become Rupert Murdoch. They're never going to get really big. I'm thinking of things like Sia Vacía, El Faro, Chequeado, Daily Maverick, lots of small quality outlets around the world. And I think they do some activities on their own, get a little teeny bit of reader revenue, although you're not going to get a lot if you're in a poor country. And they get some philanthropic money. And I think they're also part of the media ecosystem. In some ways, they really remind me of the people that I studied in the 19th century. It's a couple of dedicated people with a passion, and they're doing really important work as well. So to sum up, I agree with you about the problems. I'm really excited about the energy around solutions. I don't know if how many of them will happen, but I think it's, long overdue for us all to galvanize. And, part of what I saw in Australia was the small outlets said, we can't do that. That's going to help the big outlets. And I think part of the people that are already there, and I think part of the problem is that many of the people that are thinking about the tech companies, the competition authorities, for example, aren't thinking about the world I care about, which is quality information. If we were to cut up Facebook into 25 pieces tomorrow, we'd probably have like 25 uncontrollable, crazy, locally managed, God knows what. So I think it's very important for journalism voices to be heard in these discussions. And I think it's wonderful how boldly and ambitiously people are thinking right now. I'll mute here. Thank you so much for the chance.
Thanks a lot. So perhaps Ricardo and Lawrence, you might want to react on two things. Feel free to react on other things if you prefer. The first one is to comment on this idea of media vouchers. And I guess here we have like two different points, whether we want and to which extent we can tax all the big players for them not to decide to fund the media outlets, but to have to fund the media outlets, and then the way we want to use these vouchers, and for example, whether we are, would you agree with the fact of giving these vouchers to citizens to use them to finance the media outlets of their choice? And the second thing I would like to hear you about, which is also part of the chapter about the media and the democratizing workbook, is about the extent to which you think we can involve much more both journalists and citizens in the governance of the media. This idea that perhaps we won't find enough money for the journalists and the citizens to directly fund the media, but perhaps we can find a way to consider separately the ownership of the media from a capitalistic point of view, and the governance of the media from the point of view of who is voting and who has the voting right. So perhaps Ricardo or Lawrence, I don't know who wants to go first.
I can say a few words. about this. Well, I fully agree with these proposals, and I can tell you that the journalistic profession is behind it. So we supported these kinds of proposals. I think regarding the vouchers, I really believe it's important to empower citizens regarding the media, because in fact, it's a way to convince citizens that we are allies. It's not we are not. It will help, to regain trust. In any case, it will maybe have an impact as well on the way journalists work. I really believe that it's important for the profession. And also at the level of education, journalist students, I always insist on the fact that we are working in the people's interest, in the public interest, and that's a very important notion. I've been a journalist myself for 25 years. I never had the impression that I was working for the boss of my newspaper. My real boss was the public, and that's something we should, insist on at the level of education of journalists. Taxation of social media companies and platforms, online platforms. Of course, we support this. We pushed the European Commission to develop such a policy. It's not easy because, as you know, at the level of the European Union, you need the approval of every single member state, to have a decision on taxation, and it's not yet the case. It's not yet. We didn't manage to convince all member states to push for such a taxation policy. Then what you said, Julia, on the need to reconnect, I would say, citizens and journalists. I strongly believe on this opportunity, and that's why, as I told you, we support the model of the media councils, the Conseil de déontologie, the press councils, which is a way, to connect together. News does it. I don't think journalists should consider the news as something they belonging to them. News belongs to citizens. We are just facilitating, the transmission of news, but we are not the owners. And the media owners are the same, in the same framework, are not the owners of news. So it's really important to involve citizens, and I think that it would be possible, to involve citizens in the process of news production. That's possible now. It's some experiences are really fruitful on this, following this framework. But again, it goes against some private or particular interests. I think the main points about what we are discussing today is the public interest. So how to make journalism more in service of the public interest. So that's the main point for every single, I think, example we mentioned tonight, and that's a long-term policy. That's not just about taking a few measures. Journalism is turning private. Is becoming at the service at private or particular interests, and that's the real problem, I would say.
So I like the idea of experimenting with something like vouchers. I think it's a really important solution in the context of campaign finance, because it removes the dependence that candidates have on large contributions. Here's what I'm skeptical about. Ricardo, I think, has been very articulate about the need to improve the quality and the quantity of great journalism. And I think Anya is exactly right that we have right now an extraordinary amount of great journalism. What we don't have is the consumption of great journalism. What we instead have is the spread of journalism that captures people's emotional reaction or their anger. Indeed, in newsrooms, you have technologies that enable writers of articles to track the number of times the article gets retweeted, and they get to play with the headline to see how can they make it so their article gets retweeted or shared because of the changing of the headlines. And what I fear about the voucher model here is that it might reinforce the kind of pathology I think we all can agree is existing in media right now, which is that if every journalist were focused on how can I say what will get the most viral spread, then we have more of the same, because we've got plenty of viral spread right now. We just don't have the spread of understanding that would come from a different type of audience. I think the problem is much more fundamental. The problem is not just how do we produce great journalism, because again, I think what Ricardo and Anya have suggested is we've got lots of great journalism. We got to fund it. We don't fund it well. That's certainly true. But an even deeper problem is the infrastructure of incentives that drives the public away from understanding the complexity of the issues that journalism is supposed to be addressing. And that problem is exacerbated right now because of social media. And I'm not yet convinced that the voucher model staunches that exacerbation or reinforces it.
So Anya, on this, and perhaps on something that is very striking if you compare a number of European countries and the US, is that at least what you might think in European countries is where we have well-funded public media. So I'm thinking in particular about the BBC in the UK, to a certain extent, France Télévisions in France. I think you also have like good public media in Germany. You have more of a problem in a country like Italy, in particular in terms of independence. Do you think it can be an alternative? Because at least it might help to solve the issue Larry Lessig just lighted, the fact that you don't want people to fund the media outlets, and so to incentivize them to produce more viral content to get the vouchers.
Thank you, Julia. Apologies if you've heard me tell this story before, but about 10 years ago, I was looking at my father's desk, and I came across a copy of the New Republic from 1965. And the cover story was Why America Needs a BBC. So clearly it's something we need, have discussed for years, and should have. I think that in a lot of the countries I'm looking at around the world, there's this feeling that journalism isn't important enough to spend money on. Certainly, for example, when we've been looking at, Southern Africa, Harry Dugmore said to me recently, it's just going to be really hard. Maybe somebody else actually said that. It's going to be really hard in low-income countries to get people to agree that funding journalism is a priority. So I don't see an overnight switch in the U.S. I mean, we have obviously NPR, PBS. I don't see the U.S. getting a BBC, even though I wish we had one. But what I am seeing is lots of efforts around local news. So a number of foundations are putting money into outlets that are owned by people of color, that are in low-income neighborhoods. I thought that Free Press, Craig Aaron and Tim Carr's idea was fantastic, of taxing micro-targeting and then putting that money towards quality information. And they actually managed to get a line item in the New Jersey budget supporting local news. So I think we're going to see more kind of local initiatives than one big BBC. But, I obviously think it's going to be hard. As you know, one of the latest icky things happening in the U.S. is far-right groups or conservatives putting up websites that look like fake fake newspapers, and they even have, you know, quaint little names like whatever, the Copper Canyon Tribune or something like that. And, you know, we have a lot of outlets that are just fake. I mean, it shows how important journalism is if people are going around pretending to look like journalism. But I don't, so that's the kind of thing I see. I think, I love your voucher idea. I don't think it's necessarily going to happen in the US. And I think there's all those questions about, you know, who would administer it and how would it work? And that shouldn't matter, but we're in such a weird dysfunctional thing. We can't get anything done right now. So I definitely don't think there's anything wrong with the voucher idea. I think it's more that it's just very dysfunctional at the moment and very, very polarized.
Anya, if I can, it was our voucher idea. We wrote the Stigler report together, but...
Well, I feel bad taking credit for a great economics idea since I'm not an economist, but thank you for sharing it with me. That's very generous, Julia.
Just, Ricardo, do you think that at the European level, there can be enough, let's say, coordination to implement the kind of policy we will need to implement? And in particular, if I come back to one of Lawrence Lessig's first point, the fact of, okay, the big issue today is advertising. We need to change the incentives of the media, and in particular, we need to change the incentives of the platforms. Do you think that in the near future, there is any possibility for the European countries to sit together and to try to better regulate these issues?
I'm not really optimistic about this. I've been part of the high-level expert group on disinformation, the EU high-level expert group on disinformation, and we had discussions with representatives of the online platforms about disinformation, you know, and how these platforms could improve their internal processes in order to tackle disinformation. And these discussions were organized by the European Commission, you know, the political main body of the European Union, together with the Council. But it was a very official, I would say, discussion, including all stakeholders, you know, the media advertisement companies, the media owners, the representative of journalists as well, but also civil society organizations and so on. And I noticed during these discussions the capacity of the power, I would say, the power of social media companies. You know, representatives from Facebook were there, Twitter, Mozilla, and so on. And, you know, they were, from my point of view, really arrogant and not accepting any kind of, and from my view, I thought the Commission was the European Commission, which is one of the main, you know, powerful bodies at the European level, was so weak in front of them. So I noticed it, you know, during meetings, during including many stakeholders, you know. So I believe the social media companies, the online platforms, they are really conscious about their power, and I don't see them. There is no political willing from them to discuss with journalists, to discuss with media owners, to discuss with civil society. They have power. With that power, they make money, and they want to keep the model as it is. They don't want to change the model. And they don't care about disinformation. If it makes money, they're comfortable with it.
Yeah, I would have agreed with that completely last week or 2 weeks ago. But I'd suggest that what's happening right now in the United States, literally today, could be a really significant change. I would have said the United States was the least likely to step in and regulate. But after Frances Haugen, the Facebook whistleblower, who's released thousands of documents now that evince this fundamental fact that Facebook is a tobacco company, that again and again, they were given the choice to make their platforms safer or more profitable. And again, they chose profit. We saw a hearing this morning in the United States Senate where Republicans and Democrats alike were outraged at the behavior which these documents evinced. And I think for the first time, we're shifting from the model of thinking about, can we prove that Facebook has caused harm, to begin asking, why shouldn't Facebook prove that they're not causing harm? Why shouldn't they be like a drug company? They have a new idea for a technology, come to somebody and prove that it won't harm democratic discourse or deliberation or journalism or whatever, and to shift the burden back to them to demonstrate this kind of Hippocratic oath for social democracy, which is do no harm to democracy. Because, I think it's too slow. We should have recognized this a long time ago, but we are facing a catastrophic threat, I think, to democratic capabilities because of this system we've allowed to wire itself into our souls. And we need to leverage moments like this one right now to try to get policymakers to step up and do the right thing.
I completely agree with that, but if I want to be a little bit provocative, I would say that perhaps politicians they care more right now. But do you think that except for this time, really with all the Facebook files, and this is a very specific moment, but do you think that citizens they care enough about that? Because what is sure that citizens they don't trust the media. That I guess we all agree. But I'm not sure that if you ask a citizen what is your main preoccupation or what do you want to regulate, they will answer either the media industry or the social media.
Well, I don't know. This movie, The Social Dilemma, is the largest documentary in the history of documentaries. More than 130 million people have watched this movie. Polls show overwhelming support for doing something about it. But even if you're the most skeptical about the possibility of Congress doing anything, and Julia, I'm extremely skeptical about the capacity of Congress to do anything. There's actually a very simple thing that a company like Apple could do here that would radically change this problem. So there's a lot of evidence to demonstrate that if you just limit the reshares to 2, like 2 hops, you can only automatically share something twice. You would eliminate the vast majority of the worst content that's being shared on these platforms. It's not that you wouldn't be allowed to share it, but if you wanted to share it, you would have to copy the link into your email and share it with your friend. You just couldn't do it automatically. I think that there's a real chance that Apple could say, here's a chance for us to demonstrate our brand is safety. And we're just going to throw Facebook off the platform until they can implement changes that would make it so the platform were safe again. I think that we're at a moment where something like that is imaginable. And I think a month ago it was not.
Anya, do you want to add something on that? Oh.
Yeah, I just think that's a really exciting idea. And I also think it's like more realistic, that so much of what we're all thinking about now is sort of mitigating, slowing down. We're not going to get rid of this stuff altogether, right? But we've come to a place where, like, if we can slow it, shrink it, that's already really, really helpful and useful. And I'm excited also. This week has been unbelievable. And I'm actually teaching with Emily Bell, and we just did our session on whistleblowers last week. And I agree with you. It's one of those weeks where the news is absolutely gobsmacking, and there's more every minute. And I'm so glad that you think that, Lawrence, that this is, if I may, that this is a moment where we could see real change. That would be tremendous.
We just have 5 minutes left. Perhaps I will propose the 3 of you in the first order of the intervention. So Ricardo, then Larry, and Anya. If you would like to, I don't know, tell us in like 2 or 3 sentences, if you were to conclude something from the panel, and if you are like a policymaker either in Europe or in the US, let's be optimistic. What you will do. What is the more pressing issues now, and the best law we could pass to democratize the media? So, Ricardo?
Well, I would say that maybe there is a momentum, as Lawrence said, to convince the politicians to take action. I think we have many proposals, many, and maybe it's just time, but I would say that for that purpose, we really need an alliance between journalists and citizens. And maybe that would be the first step, to regain trust and to convince together the politicians that we need to save the media.
Yeah, I think that's the objective. The question is, what's the leverage points that gets us there? I think there are brief moments when the Overton windows open around really important opportunities for change. And we're there with democracy and social media right now. That's what is happening at this moment. And I think, as the documents that were shared with the Wall Street Journal first are now being shared with a European or a world global news consortium. If we can feed this story for a long time, it will become second nature that this is a problem we can't ignore. And Mark Zuckerberg's smiles are not enough to address the problem. And I think we've got to really press on this right now.
There was a wonderful, well, first of all, I really recommend The Ugly Truth by Sheriff Frankel and Cecilia Kang, which is an incredible book about all that Facebook knew and didn't do anything about. And there's a wonderful report that came out by a think tank in Brussels last August. And they've sort of mapped all the Facebook lobbyists in Europe, but they also have that wonderful section on all the lines that they always use. And it's exactly what Professor Lessig is saying, oh, we're doing better, oh, we're sorry. I think one thing, maybe grass is always greener, but I do think that I know everyone in Europe says, oh, the EU is too slow to regulate, but I actually think they're moving faster than anyone else. And I do think that some of the EU regulations do become a global standard, things like the ad library. So I really say to our friends in Europe, keep pushing the EU, because what you do there can actually make a difference for the rest of the world. So that I think, that would probably be, I'll stop there because I know we're out of time, but that maybe will be my final. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the three of you for participating in this panel. It was really great to have this discussion. I hope we will continue it at some point. Thanks for all those who attended and for the questions in the chat. And yes, if you didn't have it yet, I would recommend you to go on the Democratizing Work website and to try to continue this discussion together and try to push this agenda. So thank you very much. Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye.